Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, the news about the NBA's return has been coming in quickly over the past few days, and one of the biggest sort of, not just Woj bombs, but Brian Windhorst and Shams bombs has been, there might be a potential change to the playoff sort of format this season. They've been talking about it forever, but having a 16-team reseed is a potential situation for the NBA playoffs. So instead of the Toronto Raptors obviously playing the Orlando Magic or the Brooklyn Nets again in the first round like it seems like we always do, we'd end up playing as the third seed right now, the 14th seed in the NBA, which would currently be the Memphis Grizzlies. Then in the second round, if things sort of don't change right now, we'd play the Denver Nuggets, then potentially the Lakers, and then potentially the Bucks or the Clippers if everything sort of organizes itself the way it goes, rather than the teams we were sort of expecting all year. First things first, do you like this format?
Well, I don't like how you wrote off the Rockets there in that playthrough of the playoffs preview, Ben. I think that, listen, the Rockets using their unorthodox small ball lineup, the Lakers were one of the first teams that they defeated that got all the heads turning saying, could this style of basketball actually win or make a deep playoff push? But that's obviously, this is not the topic of our discussion, Ben. But you know what I think? This is my initial reaction, because I guess you can toss a picture of this up on the board, what the reseeding would look like, and we'll talk about how, obviously this wouldn't benefit the teams that are fighting to make a playoff spot in the West, because the majority of those final teams, I'm pretty sure, have a better record than the 8th seed in the East. But Ben, what I'm thinking is, if you do this sort of reseeding where you're mixing and matching conferences, if you're a fan of the East, this makes the playoffs way more exciting, because that first round is traditionally not that interesting in the East. If you're a fan of the West, I don't know what the reaction would be, because they're always pretty jam-packed with talent, Ben.
Yeah, well, it depends if you want your Western Conference team to win or not. So, obviously the upper seeds are going to get an easier matchup in the Western Conference, whereas the lower seeds are probably going to be messed up regardless. But this is a really interesting thing, and we'll obviously look at it for sort of a Raptors perspective first, because Riker, as things stand, we'd right now probably play, I think it's the Nets, the Celtics, and the Bucks. And right now the route to the finals would look like the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, and either the Rockets or the Lakers, or maybe the Jazz if they can sort of get up there. What sort of route would you say, as a Raptors fan specifically, would be the more ideal route? Because obviously, I think the first round match without KD is a wash against the Nets. The Grizzlies are a bit better in my opinion, but the Celtics and the Nuggets, there's been some controversy on which team is better there. And then obviously the Bucks, we beat them last year, but they're obviously stronger this season. And the Lakers, they have LeBron James, who's been the Achilles heel for the Toronto Raptors over the past decade. So what sort of route to the finals would you like to see in this sort of format?
Well, Ben, I would like to go through, I don't mind going through the East. It's not as exciting, but this is the challenge, Ben, because the Raptors, I don't think that there is that certainty or that legitimacy around the most recent championship victory, the only championship victory, obviously, for the Toronto Raptors. And all of us fans will agree that it was well-deserved, and we defeated the teams that we needed to defeat. But there's an asterisk on that championship. I don't think there's any denying that it's the what if Kawhi wasn't there, and, insert here how low everybody else thinks the Raptors would have ended up without Kawhi Leonard, right? So I think to go through the regular East matchups and defeat those teams for a second year in a row, if we were to play the 76ers, but even if it was the Celtics, right, a traditional rivalry, again, to get through the Bucks, right, that might be the hardest matchup in the NBA regardless, right? I think that would just really clear up some of that uncertainty about last season's championship. But we've been watching this Raptors team get bullied by LeBron for years and years in the DeMar DeRozan era. We've watched them play the Bucks so many times. We've watched them play all these. How many times have we watched that Orlando Magic series? Again, as a fan of basketball, as a fan of the Toronto Raptors, I would personally, I think it would just be very exciting to see this sort of cross play, have a couple teams in the West that you'd never play in a playoff series. And I think that it actually might be a bit easier to go through this reseed. If it was to remain current, it would be easier to get to the finals this way than to stick in the East and have to play the Celtics and then the Bucks.
Interesting. So you obviously brought up a lot of points there. The legitimacy argument. I don't know if necessarily people are questioning the legitimacy of the championship. I think most of the questions are about the injuries in the finals. But we went through the Sixers and the Bucks last season. I think that the legitimacy argument. I guess on the current roster is sort of a thing if, the guys that we have currently can sort of make a playoff push, and I agree. It would be nice to see the Toronto Raptors beat teams like the Celtics and the Bucks who sort of trash on us by saying, oh, it was all Kawhi and stuff like that. So that's definitely a point in the favor of wanting to go through the Eastern Conference, especially the Celtics fans, because that's a series I've been wanting to see for so many years, because obviously we never played them in the playoffs, but we always have great regular season matchups. We've been the first, second, top tier teams in the Eastern Conference for the past 4 or 5 years. Obviously the Bucks have kind of stormed onto the scene as of last season, but it'd be nice to get a series against them, because I think that would be the de facto second round matchup as things stand right now. So I definitely agree with you on your point there, but I don't know. I go back and forth sort of thinking about it over the past day, which route would be easier. Because obviously we both think that the Nets and the Grizzlies, we'd be able to handle them pretty strongly, but the Grizzlies would be a much more exciting matchup to watch, as obviously seeing JV come back and Ja Morant play. That'd be a much more fun first round series than the Nets, who are without Kyrie and KD, even though they're a solid team. But as you mentioned, teams like the Magic and the Nets, you're kind of bored of seeing them in the first round. The Grizzlies are new and exciting to see. But I want to throw this at you, because this is the team that I'm sort of conflicting, and then maybe we can talk about the Bucks versus the Lakers. But the Celtics and the Nuggets, who do you think? Obviously, I think the rivalry sort of factor, the Celtics might be a more fun series, but who do you think we'd have a better chance against? Because I think the Nuggets get underrated. Really?
Yeah. Listen.
That decisively.
No, listen. Yeah, that decisively, because Kemba Walker is a certified star, and they just don't have that talent on the Nuggets from the 1 or 2 position. Jamal Murray, he's developing into that. You have Barton, you have Harris. You have these guys that are really talented shooting guards and ball handlers, but I think the simple fact is they just don't have the accolades. They don't have that sort of veteran ability to win games like Kemba Walker does. And now let aside that the Celtics are a team that is known for their defensive ability, and they have a really fantastic supporting cast and a fantastic coach. And nothing against Denver Nuggets, and they've had also a good defense this regular season. They also have a pretty well-rounded team. But if I look at the completeness of the Boston Celtics, to me, they're a league ahead of the Denver Nuggets still.
And I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of like your outcome, because I might lean towards the Celtics as well, but I look at the Denver Nuggets roster, and this team is just really underrated. In the Western Conference last year, they were a game away from making the Western Conference Finals against the Portland Trail Blazers, who were really strong and I think get underrated because they got swept by the Warriors. But if you look back at all those games, they were up by 20 and 25 points against that Warriors team. So, and the Nuggets are, as you mentioned, they're getting better every single season. Now, it might be a question if Jokic's sort of athleticism is going to fall off, because he's been notoriously unconditioned after long breaks, but assuming he's healthy, I think he's better than any player on the Boston Celtics right now. Jamal Murray is obviously a guy that played
but hold on to that point for a sec. Do you not think it's easier to stop a center in a playoff game than it is to stop basically any other position?
I think, well, I guess if you're arguing Tatum versus Jokic, because he's obviously the best player on the Celtics, Jokic, I think, is a lot more well-rounded, and obviously we have Marc Gasol, matchups-wise, which would play in our favor, because he's a center lockdown player, but Jokic's just shooting ability, his passing ability, his ability to create, he's not like a guy like Joel Embiid, who's a remarkable scorer, but falls into sort of traps. Jokic really has a strong basketball IQ, and I feel like can figure out double teams, and did so in the last year's playoffs, and just almost got to the Western Conference Finals. And you bring up the well-roundedness of the Boston Celtics, and I think I'd argue the Nuggets are more well-rounded. They have Paul Millsap and Jeremiah Grant, who could I definitely messed up that first name, but those Jeremiah, whatever. But two of those guys are mobile defenders, and our lead scorer at the 4 is our lead scorer is at the 4 in their position is Pascal Siakam. So they could probably have a solid defensive strategy against him. Whereas I feel like even Tatum's a good defender, Siakam will be able to eat up him and Gordon Hayward and whoever they throw at him. Michael Porter Jr., he's an unknown coming off the bench. Maybe he'll get unleashed once the playoffs come. Obviously, Will Barton,
you can't give
Monte
them an
Morris,
edge because of a guy who might have potential to eventually play good.
But well-roundedness, Riker. Like Gary Harris, Monte Morris, Will Barton, they're bucket getters, and their team just makes sense. I don't know. They don't have the big names. Torrey Craig has had a remarkable year. Mason Plumlee can come off the bench. They're 10 guys
The
deep.
Celtics, they won big matchups. The Nuggets, to me, they're like the Raptors, and they win the games that they should win. So their record is where it is right now because they've taken care of the lesser teams. But I think in terms of playoff-tested veteran talent, a mix of, younger guys with good defensive ability, and what the team can actually do performing at their best, which is, the Celtics, they play fast, they have good outside shooters, and their number one guy isn't a center. I think that's a big factor to consider in the playoff time because when you have a bunch of bigs, you want the ball to go through. When you're on D, you want the ball to go through the center because that means they have to go through half-court sets. They're not looking to push the ball in the fast break as much, and they're not relying on three-point shooting as much. That makes your job way easier on the defensive end rather than the Celtics, where their number one guy is their shooting guard. So they're looking to push. They're looking to increase the tempo. You have to be aware of rotations outside of the perimeter. That sort of mixture is, as we've seen, is a lot more difficult thing to match up against come playoff time.
That's a fair point. And if I look at it, if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose the Nuggets, but I have my hesitations. I definitely wouldn't say definitely they're better. And another point too, I think you sort of fall in this trap as well as me. I think both of us believe that we could beat the Celtics, and we believed that for a long time. So I don't feel as scared of the Celtics as rather as the unknown as the Nuggets, because we've played the Nuggets consistently over the past 3 or 4 years since they've gotten good, and it feels like we lose to them, especially on the road every
consistently.
time.
We consistently lose to the Nuggets.
Yeah, so I just have this feeling, and I've been of the belief they're really underrated for a long time now. So I think that's an interesting debate. But obviously, it'd be nice to have sort of the rivalry with the Boston Celtics. But both of those second round matchups would be fun. But here's the big one, the sort of interesting debate: the Bucks and the Lakers in the potential conference finals or I guess I don't know if it'd be conference finals if it's called the 16 reseed or whatever, but. Who would you rather play, Ryker? Because in my opinion, in a vacuum, this Bucks team is better. I think they're built strong and all that sort of stuff. And Giannis is obviously out for revenge, but I feel like we sort of have the Bucks number. We beat them in the playoffs twice, and I feel like if we can get the mental advantage and Nick Nurse can run some more strategies against Giannis's sort of driving fast break offense like we did last year, then I think the Bucks, even though I think they're a better team, I think we have a better chance against them. But the Lakers, I don't think they're as well-rounded as the Bucks, but the mental factor of LeBron James, it'd be such a fun thing to overcome, and that's why I'd sort of rather play them. But it might be a tougher path, but I just want to beat LeBronto. That's sort of a catch-22 for me. Which series would you rather see the Toronto Raptors play in this hypothetical scenario?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know, because I think both would be equally as satisfying to win. Mm-hmm. And I think both would be equally as challenging to overcome. And I think I like your assessment on the Bucks, because really the Bucks, I think they are the best team in the NBA right now. Not just because of their record. I think that they're the most difficult team in a single game matchup to beat. Right? That they are the best defensive team. They're one of the best scoring teams. They have the best player in the NBA right now. I think that
on paper, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's hard to really counter any of those points just in terms of their raw ability. But I agree that the Bucks in the regular season, they play as well as they possibly could in the playoffs. And that's not to say they can't have a better game in the playoffs than they would in the regular season. Mm-hmm. But they're not going to switch it up. What you play against in the regular season, you can plan for in the playoffs. Brook Lopez, he's going to get up his 3-point shots. Giannis, if he makes a couple extra threes per game, if you're giving him a lot of space, you're going to die by that, right? That's just going to happen. But you know what his gameplay is going to be. You know what Eric Bledsoe is going to do, right? Their style of play is very consistent throughout the regular season, throughout the playoffs. They don't have the ability to change. And we saw that in last playoffs, right? When they started when we switched Kawhi onto Giannis, and they didn't have an answer for that, took 4 games on him in a row. They weren't able to respond because they have one style of play. And I agree.
Yeah, and those Atlanta Hawks teams that Mike Budenholzer coached. They were 60-win teams, but they just got swamped in the playoffs because they weren't able to change their sort of strategy.
Exactly. But the thing is, they've become so good that everybody knows, like you said, everybody has their number, but their strategy is just so good. It's so difficult
Yep.
to beat. So that's the issue with the Bucks. But I agree that the Lakers, they're so strange, and they're such like a mythical force, because LeBron, he can adapt. He can adapt to anything. He can become any player. He can become a shooter. He can become the primary ball handler. He can become, the primary scorer, whatever you need him to do. And I think Anthony Davis would be the X factor of that series, because he would be the most difficult possible matchup for the Raptors, in that, you're not going to stop LeBron with OG. OG will do a good job, but now you got to put a lot of effort onto him. But now you're taking a lot of your switches off of Anthony Davis, and he's a killer. So I think that would be the hardest matchup as well.
Word. That's the interesting thing, because even though the Bucks might be the better team in a vacuum, the Lakers would probably be the more difficult opponent for the Toronto Raptors specifically, especially with the history of LeBron. Even though I think Giannis is the better player at this point in their careers with ages and all that, but you never know in the playoffs. But Ryker, beating LeBron James and beating him on the Lakers, sort of overcoming that mountain of LeBronto, I think it's possible. It's definitely possible this season. And you look at the Lakers roster, and yes, they have a lot of big names, and LeBron and AD will be very difficult to game plan for, and it wouldn't be like the sort of Bucks series last year where we only have one guy where we had to really lock down and sort of die by everyone else, that guy obviously being Giannis. We'd have to shut down LeBron and AD. But the supporting cast of the Lakers just doesn't scare me at all. Anyone else, like the Bucks, they have Chris Middleton, I guess, is the second star, which isn't close to Anthony Davis, but Brook Lopez, George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, even though Bledsoe struggles in the playoffs, those sort of supporting guys are 3-and-D players that make sense to their team. But guys like Dwight Howard, Kuzma, Markieff Morris, Dion Waiters, Rondo, Danny Green, who we've seen really struggle this season in the playoffs, McGee, Alex Caruso, like, they're names people know because they're always memed about and all that sort of stuff, but they're not 3-and-D players. They're not guys that really scare me in a playoff series. So I think it's possible we beat that Lakers team, even though they might be the harder matchup because of the star power. And Ryker, how sweet would it be to beat LeBron in overcome that sort of mountain that we've done without, with pure Raptors guys? Because obviously we had Kawhi last year. This would be the Raptors team beating it. That would be remarkable.
Well, I said last season, that if we lose Kawhi, it'll be a more important, it'll be more impactful playoffs, because this is the true Raptors team. It's the core team, right? It's the guys that really we've grown to know and that have really come through the whole development process. Yeah, I mean, that's special. And I think that LeBron has, as you said, he's so long through the history of the Toronto Raptors playoffs of the past 8 years, right? He's been that guy that we've never been able to get around. It would be really sweet to defeat him in the playoffs, right? Without Kawhi, just pure gritty basketball, pure Toronto Raptors basketball. The only thing is, I wonder, I don't know. I mean, they're around the same size, I guess, as the Bucks. They might even be a little bit smaller. And I think the Bucks might put the Raptors into foul trouble easier than the Raptors would. It's just so interesting. I'd love to play the Lakers, but I think, Ben, we could both agree that we want to see that final series, regardless if we stick in the East or if there's this mismatch between, or this shuffling and all the 1 through 16 is played. We both want to see a Kawhi Clippers versus Raptors finals.
That's the big thing. That's because I think it's debatable which path will be easier. And that's what this sort of podcast has been talking about. The Celtics, Nuggets, the Lakers, or the Bucks. What would you rather see? But being able to play, if the route of Grizzlies, Nuggets, then beating LeBron potentially. Obviously, we'd have to beat all of these teams in order to make this scenario play out. But then if we could beat LeBron and then beat Kawhi in the finals, obviously that's a tall task, and we'd be able to talk about the specific series for days. But how amazing would that playoff run potentially be? The maximum just hypeness of being able to play the Clippers in the NBA Finals against Kawhi after we'd potentially beat LeBron. That would be, obviously the Bucks would have a good shot against the Clippers as well if they potentially got there. But how sweet would it be? We just talked about beating LeBron and then beating Kawhi, who just left. Even though you and I don't have any hate towards Kawhi, but being able to beat him after he left, that would be remarkable. That would probably feel better than beating LeBron, in my opinion.
Well, yes, because this will never be put to bed unless the Raptors can defeat Kawhi in a playoff series, right? There will always be that Kawhi won the Raptors a championship asterisk unless the Raptors defeat Kawhi. I think that there's no two ways around that, Ben. And whether it sticks in the East and we face Kawhi in the finals, or it switches it up and face Kawhi in the finals, you have to go through two of the top three players in the NBA. You're either going through Giannis and Kawhi or LeBron and Kawhi. And both of those series are going to test the Raptors to the absolute limit. But we both believe that they can do that, right? That this is the season that this team established, that they currently have, this roster that they currently have, has the talent, has the coaching, and has the defensive ability to beat some of the the most talented players in the world, or that the NBA has ever seen, to be frank.
And the confidence. The big thing about the Toronto Raptors, obviously we probably wouldn't have beaten many of those Cavs teams. They were obviously more talented, but the reason we got swept was mental. That was the big thing. We could have at least got 2-3 games off of those LeBron teams, in my opinion, just talent-wise. And now we have guys that have won championships, that are mentally hardened, know how to win these games. And Ryker, the last point, I know we're going long here, to why this probably would be ideal. If Giannis Antetokounmpo loses to the Toronto Raptors again, then he would have lost the Raptors 3 times in his playoff career. I don't see him as maybe a guy that would want to go to a conference rival similar to KD. Yeah. If we can get another team to beat him instead of us, not have the playoff success with the Bucks, but not have it come at the hands of the Toronto Raptors, that might be a perfect scenario for him to not sign that Supermax deal and be more willing to come to this team in the future.
Yep, I 100% agree, Ben. And if you didn't bring that up, I was going to bring it up.
Yeah, so that final verdict, I think I want this potential reseed to happen as things sort of go now. Obviously, if they do a little bit of a regular season thing and the seeding shifts, this could all be completely messed up. But are you in agreement with that, or would you rather see the East go?
No, I like it. Like I said at the very beginning, I think for fans of the East, this makes playoffs much more exciting. Maybe for a team like this, a Celtics fan or something, they want to just see the Celtics finally get through the East. But I think for most of the teams, this makes it more interesting. And what we'll have to talk about in another podcast is, this format, it really slights the teams that are just outside of the playoffs on the West. Because if you're doing a true 1-16, then a couple of those teams would shift up, and a couple teams in the East, I think, would drop off. So, that's a full another can of worms, Ben, but I think as is, if they were to start this today, I think it would be more interesting to do it this new format, I think, just from an entertainment standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to see the Celtics have to go through the Sixers, the Clippers, then the Bucks in their whole Eastern Conference playoffs or whatever. But let us know what you guys think. You're the best for making this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all the cool stuff. Ryker, have any last words on the potential NBA playoff format?
Oh, we're getting close now, Ben. It's getting real.
Woo!
Cheers.